Dr. Shannon Ferrell and Dr. Matt Brosi at some point to come to the stage and share about their work and talk to us about toxic grit.
All right. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Hopefully one of these mics is on there. There we go. Oh, now you can hear me way too well. I'm going to actually switch us over to our slide deck here. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, who's excited to talk about mental disorders? That's way better than the response I was anticipating. So, I love you guys. This is fantastic. I'm Shannon Ferrell. I'm an ag econ professor at OSU. I've specialized in agricultural law. And you're asking yourself, why is that guy up here? He's not qualified. You're right, I'm not. If you've ever watched the old Saturday Night Live skit with Stuart Smalley, where he would do his daily affirmations, right? I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. I'm that guy, okay? I have encountered a lot of these issues as I do a lot of my work with farm transition planning, how we get farm families to get their businesses from one generation to the next. And I keep running into the fact that it's not the legal mechanics of how that stuff works, it's the family dynamics and relationships which give rise to lots of stressful situations. And that got me connected to Dr. Matt Brosi, who's also going to be presenting with me today. Now, Matt and I go to the same church together. We've worked in our pre-marriage ministry together. Matt's an amazing therapist. He's actually one of the leads on the co-parenting through divorce curriculum and is just one of the absolute experts in the state in marriage and family therapy, especially when we're talking about rural families. Because, let's face it, the whole reason that we have the topic that we've got today, this toxic grit thing, is in agriculture we're supposed to be tough, right? We're supposed to be able to take anything. We're strong, we're resilient. You throw anything at farmers and ranchers, they just keep on trucking like the Terminator, right? And we also know that farmers are able to do that because they're exceptional at getting together and talking about their feelings, right? I know that my dad managed a co-op back at home, and I know that you'd gather around the coffee machine there in the co-op, and the guys would just talk about their feelings. Bill, now, when I forgot to grease the bearings in the combine and the field caught on fire, I sure felt vulnerable, right? We all know that's what happened, or maybe not, right? So maybe we have to elevate the level of conversation that we have about mental health issues in agriculture. And I don't have any legitimacy telling you to do that if I don't do it myself. So let's talk about Ferrell's life during the pandemic for just a second. Now, like I said, I'm an ag law specialist, and one of my two big areas of specialty is farm transition planning and estate planning. So I'm the free lawyer in the state for you to ask your questions about estate planning stuff. I've had some business over the past couple of years, and I have handed estate planning documents through emergency room doors to a nurse to take up to somebody in an ICU room, and I've FaceTimed them through how to execute their will 72 hours after their husband died without a will. And I've had students who are now orphans, and it started to take a toll on me. I was dealing with this stuff nonstop, and I had every symptom of burnout you can have. I became anhedonic, which means nothing brought me joy, and if you know me, I'm a guy that likes to have fun. But nothing made me have fun. I showed symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of depression, and it took me a long time to kind of figure that stuff out. So I'm willing to bet I'm not alone. I'm willing to bet for all of you, you had to adapt to all sorts of things you never had to adapt to. Whether your business just absolutely tanked during the pandemic or whether it's skyrocketed, there's still stressors associated with all that stuff. So what we're going to talk about today is a little bit half town hall, half getting you equipped to understand how mental health issues work, specifically how they can be addressed in the ag sector, so that you can help yourself, you can help your customers, you can help your vendors, you can help the people in your community as well. I will say, we actually want you on your smartphones for this presentation because this is not a spectator sport, this is participation. But we don't want to make you raise your hands or say, yeah, I had burnout, yeah, I've had anxiety, yeah, I've dealt with eating disorders. Nobody wants to do that in this space. I completely understand that. We want you to do that confidentially, but to share it with us. So, here you go. I apologize. For me to have a better web address than this, it costs another $150, and I teach at a public university. So, it's pollev for polleverywhere.com/Shannon Ferrell 6065, right? Or you can text to the number 2233, Shannon Ferrell 665. It's like $80 for each additional L. I apologize for that. But go there on your smartphone right now because we have some questions to ask you. And question number 1 is, when you think of mental health, what words come to, oh, yes, questions. Oh, go back. Oh, sorry. My bad. And by the way, Mr. Brosi, did you have this active on your computer so this actually works? You're sure about that? Because I don't see the instructions on here. I'll hide too so you can see the screens if you're in the middle of the room. Mr. Brosi, do you have your phone out? You're our control. See if you can participate in this next poll. All right, everybody ready? So, this weather we're having. And by the way, if you want to support an Oklahoma business afterwards, go to Oklahoma Joe's after you wrap up the conference. This is right across the street. Get the cherry fried pie, get the burnt ends. You can thank me later, okay? Everybody got it? And this is why I should have paid the extra $150, Matt. Then I could have made it whatever I wanted. Everybody ready? Feeling good? Okay, let's see if you guys can be part of this poll. Matt, tell me if you can do this poll. Matt has a very distressed look on his face. I did this on Matt's computer, now, not my own. Can you participate here? And if not, we'll switch over and make sure you actually can participate. The expressions, you got to talk. I'm reading your nonverbal cues here. Okay, all right, hold on just 1 second. Ah, this is apparently the one that's actually active. Nice. Look outstanding. Oh, it's working. Keep going, guys. You guys are doing fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I'm seeing some words that I really want to talk about here, too. You guys are the best crowd we've ever had at this. You are so good. You are so good. Keep it going. And I'll tell you right now, the word that we're seeing biggest on the screen, which means it's the most popular response, we're seeing depression, anxiety. Following that, we see therapy, stress. Matt, I'm looking for some other big words, but there's a lot of really great ones I want to see up here. We've seen suicide, stigma, overwhelmed, isolation. Oh, we're going to talk about isolation. We're really good at that in agriculture in rural America as well. Burnout, heartache, heavy. Oh, therapy's popping up a lot. Self, yes. Excellent. It's slowing down a little bit. You know what I find fascinating? Depression kind of comes and goes. There's not a lot of other words that are standing out, but that means that there's a lot of different things that come out, which I find really encouraging because it tells me that you guys are thinking about this broadly. It's not just one thing that you've been told by the media or one thing that you've seen in your discussions with family and friends. It's really dynamic. Depression standing out a lot, therapy, anxiety, stress. Yeah. And it keeps going. This is fantastic. I love it so much. Oops. I'm going to hop out here. Okay. We may have to hop over to these. Just 1 second. I apologize for everybody. I want to make sure that we're doing this right. Okay. So Matt, you're going to be my monitor on these to make sure the next one works, and if not, I'll switch over to the website, okay? Okay. Why are we talking about this? Well, why am I blanking up my slides? It's a big deal in Oklahoma, and I hate to malappropriate one of our state mottos, but Oklahoma is not okay. We are a leading state when it comes to a lot of these mental health disorders. You know, the incidence of what we would call mental health issues, which means an issue that arises to the point where it impairs our ability to function the way that we normally would. It doesn't mean we're completely on the sidelines. It doesn't mean that we're completely, never isolate, or we're isolating with ourselves, we're never interacting with anybody, but it affects our relationships, it affects our work, it affects our family. 22% per year in Oklahoma, that's over a fifth of us, are suffering from some form of mental health disorder in a given year, which is a lot. And this has improved a little bit, I would argue, in recent years, but we're not there yet. Mental health issues are stigmatizing, okay? And let me give you a very vivid example from my own life. Two days before Halloween last year, It was 50-mile-per-hour winds in Oklahoma. I stepped outside my house and I hit the lottery because a particle of something, we don't know what it was, that had flesh-eating bacteria landed in my left eye. And I had flesh-eating bacteria in my eye. That was fun. I had to wear an eye patch. People thought I was a pirate for Halloween and just never got the memo that it was over, right? And for 4 months, I was walking around wearing an eye patch, and people were like, oh, man, I'm so sorry. How did that happen? Like, and they were so kind, right? When I was wearing an eye patch. And if I had said, well, hey, guys, guess what? I had a really severe issue of burnout, and I've been dealing with clinical depression for a while. How do you think people would have responded, right? Probably like, that's a shame there, Ferrell. Well, hey, wow, look at the time. I got a thing in the place with the people, right? It makes people uncomfortable. There's a stigma around it. And do people think it was my fault that I got flesh-eating bacteria in my left eye? I mean, I don't go bobbing for apples in septic tanks a whole lot, okay? I'm not really asking for it. It just kind of happened to me. But yet, if you've got a mental health disorder, well, you know, if you just were a stronger person, or, you know, if your faith was stronger, you wouldn't have that kind of issue. Or if you just had just cheer up, Ferrell, just cheer up, just decide to be happier, right? That's what we deal with, especially in agriculture and rural America, a ton with this stuff. And it was bad enough before. The reason that Matt and I and other groups in the state were confronting this is because we were facing a farm crisis in the late 20-teens, right? 17, 18, 19. And as a kid who grew up in the mid-1980s during that farm crisis, I didn't need to go through that again, okay? My parents both worked multiple off-farm jobs just to keep our farm afloat. I know how hard that was, and that's why we were trying to position ourselves to help farmers and ranchers in those circumstances now. And then comes this little thing called COVID-19. Every mechanism that you would have used to provide resilience for yourself, the support networks you would have plugged into, your local faith community, community activities, your gatherings of friends and family, all gone. So take all those stressors and now take away all the things that you would have done to adapt to those stressors. And you kind of had a recipe for disaster there. But we're not helpless in this. And if you take nothing away from today's talk, I hope what you take away is this, that you can do something about it in your own life and that you can do something about it in the lives of the people around you. You folks live at the nexus of so many connections in your communities just by virtue of what you do. You're wonderfully positioned to see if people are hurting and get them the help that they need. So, one of the things we want you to take away from today is that there is that boundary line between well and unwell. We all go through stress. We all feel down sometimes. We all have some form of anxiety. And the thing about it is, I want you to think about that in the analogy of when should you go to the doctor? You know, I've got a sniffle, I've got a cough. Okay, well maybe I take some medicine and I'll be okay. Versus I fell off the tractor and is my arm supposed to bend that direction? I don't think it is. I should probably go get an x-ray, right? When do you recognize that line between something's just a little bit amiss, but I'm pretty sure I can bounce back from it to like I've crossed a line now. I feel like I'm unwell and I need to get some kind of help there. And it's something that we all encounter, right? The way that we react to stress may vary a lot, but we all encounter it in some form or fashion, and it's all proportional, right? We all fight our own battles. Something that might be no big deal to me might be a huge deal to somebody else. And something that might not be a big deal to them might be a huge deal to me because we all come at it from our own frame of reference there. So we're going to talk about what we can do about this stuff. And we're going to talk about why this is really unique in agriculture. And that's because we have unique stressors in agriculture. I mean, when I ask farm families going through the transition process, well, why do you guys farm in the first place? Is it the easy hours, the steady paycheck, you know, the low stress environment, air conditioning, right? There are easier ways to make a buck, folks. I'm here to tell you, okay, as an economist, you can do it. But we stick to agriculture, which has lots of stressors that are completely outside of our control. And again, go back to the impacts of the pandemic, right? All those community connections that we had were taken away from us for a while. Furthermore, we live in these, spread out communities, which, for lots of us, that's fantastic. I am a Western Oklahoma kid. I grew up in Leedy, Oklahoma. I get claustrophobic around trees because I can't see for 20 miles in any direction, right? Oh, sure. Well, here's a poll. Hold on that for a second. Hold on, poll. I'll get there. So, we like open spaces, but it means we're far apart. We're isolated. We have less access to health care in some cases, and especially, that's extra true, Oklahoma is riddled with what we would call mental health service deserts, where you're over 50 miles away from getting access to an in-person mental health professional. So, let's examine all that. What are your sources of stress? And by the way, you can select all those that apply. When I first set up this question, I just had pick one, and Matt's like, no. Let people pick them all, right? So if it's all of them, I want you to take your keyboard and go, and just do that, okay? I should have just put in all of the above there, but that's okay. Tell us where that stress comes from. I didn't put holidays on here, by the way. You can put that with relationship with, family. People always want to have their farm transition meetings at Christmas, and I'm like, that's a great idea. Everybody has stress-free holidays. Just overlay that on top of it as well, right? You got 140, 145. Oh, man, that was a bang. 150. I got 150 now, 155. Divide by 60. 65, 75, 75. All right. You guys are fantastic. Like, I can't rave about you guys enough. You are leaning into this, and I love it. 176. Ooh. Can we get to 200? 200, come on, 200. 189, 193. I don't have any Major League Baseball because of the lockout, so I'm counting on this, folks. All right, come on, 200. Oh, we're over 200. 204, we've kind of slowed down. 5, 6, 7, they're trickling. Do I push the button yet? 211, 13, 14, 15. Man, they keep coming in, 220. All right, let's see what we got here. Work. You guys telling me you don't have a stress-free workplace? It's not like the office, right? You're not the world's greatest boss, Michael Scott? Well, okay. Or maybe you are the world's greatest boss and you're still dealing with those employees, right? Oh, they're still coming in. Outstanding. It's still dynamic. Excellent. Financial situation. Number one cause of domestic disputes, finances. Probably doesn't surprise anybody. But oh, by the way, money fights are very rarely about money. It's about priorities, communication, trust, control, your vision of the future, but it's a big deal. Relationship with a significant other. When I was dealing a lot with burnout during the pandemic, who dealt with that, right? It was my wife and my kid. And it's not that I lashed out at them, but I was just unavailable. I just wasn't the guy that they were used to having around. I wasn't a source of joy for them. I had a diminished capacity to be responsive to their needs. And that was tough on them. Nobody can sense stress better than kids. Kids experience the stress of their parents. It's very real. So this is fantastic. This is really illuminating. I love this stuff. So I'm going to turn things over to Matt now. So I've kind of given you Matt's bio already. But Matt's going to talk about resilience. And when we talk about toxic grit and toughness, I want you to remember that if something's too tough, when you bend it, it doesn't bend, it just snaps. So we're going to talk about what it takes to bend but come back, and that is resilience. And I turn the wand over to you, Matthew.
You're going to need help with the polls eventually. All right. Well, first, thanks for coming today, and thanks for entertaining us. We are from Oklahoma State University, so we're both academics. And so I apologize for the presentation style. It's a lot of information. Some of it's theoretical, but it is building a case. And the thing is how do we deal with stress? A lot of people lob the word resilience around. How many of you, I won't make you raise your hand. Shannon said you wouldn't have to. Give me the farmer's nod, right? Y'all heard of the term resilience, right? Whenever you think of resilience, a lot of people have different ideas of what resilience is, okay? First and foremost, it's the basic, it's an engineering term. It's the ability to bounce back from adversity. Now, the thing is in my field, in mental health, we always talk about, well, stress is one thing, but overcoming that stress is another thing. And the point that I usually take away is, I may go through a stressful event, a situation, a divorce, for example, but to what degree do I carry that stress or that situation around for the rest of my life? In other words, the limp. So across the board, it's a broad systems construct referring to the capacity of a dynamic system to withstand or recover from significant disturbances. But it's more than just coping. It's what we do with the stress that matters. And we're going to build a case throughout the rest of this presentation. And there's overwhelmingly 4 general schools of thought. And in my field, I'm a mental health professional. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, so we see this all the time. And I like to look at it from 4 different angles. One is good outcomes despite the adversity. Now, what do we say good outcomes? Symptom-free. So to what degree do I experience stress, but still I'm able to experience, my daily functioning goes about the normal business as usual. Sustained competence under stress. So to what degree can I experience a stressful event, but still think clearly enough to mobilize the resources to overcome the stress, to minimize the constraints that's keeping me in that response cycle, and then to do effectively. But it's also the interaction between protective and risk factors. So like I said before, if my wife is a resource for me, can I go to her and just say, hey, honey, I'm having a really hard time with this situation. My kid is really driving me nuts, and I'm really struggling with this. I usually don't do that. Instead, I'm like, why are you nagging at me right now? What's going on? Why am I the bad guy? So I respond inappropriately. And then recovery from trauma. And we're going to use the word trauma a couple different times here. And this is where I use the word functional. And a lot of us has fallen into the trap of becoming functional. We go through the motions. We experience stress, we experience trauma from our families of origin, we experience some situation, and we end up carrying that baggage for the rest of our lives. And we never really dealt with it. And that's what we're seeing a lot of stacking up right now, especially during COVID. So how does this process get the best of us? And that's what this presentation is really all about, is the overload process. We know that stress is a normative process. Everybody experiences stress. There's a lot of different main types of stress. There's significant life events. These could be traumatic events like a car accident, sudden losses, disasters, death, illnesses. One thing I learned from the Ag Econ folks is the 5 Ds, farm stress, divorce, disability, death, disease, and drought. I think those are the 5. Developmental changes, career changes, family changes, aging. A lot of times these is what we call eustress. It's good stress that kind of invigorates us and keeps us alive and keeps us moving, and we kind of enjoy those challenges. And I'm a guy that likes a good challenge, put me in coach kind of mentality. And then we have those daily stressors. And that's what I think a lot of us are constantly dealing with, those work challenges, the people at work, the added responsibilities. There's a meme that's out there. I just learned what memes are, right? I'm getting hip and cool with the... Anyway, I know a meme, and it basically said, one of the joys of doing your job well is that you get to do other people's as well. And that's what we're seeing a lot more of as we take on more and more responsibilities. We're seeing some downturns in the economy. We're seeing, positions not being filled, and so we're taking on more things. Family routines are getting more chaotic. In my week, I got Monday, we got Scouts. Got an older one in Boy Scouts, got a younger one in Cub Scouts. Tuesdays is soccer. Wednesdays is Awana at church. Thursdays is soccer again. And Friday is, I don't know. It used to be date night, but that's gone now. And my wife just had the audacity of saying, let's put the younger one in Taekwondo. I'm like, no, I'm done. So there's no room for extracurricular things to rebound from this process. And so we're struggling with those personal balance demands. There's some traditional types of stressors, which is time pressure, and this is where we start to see some themes. What does it take to manage all of these different things throughout the week? Time management, prioritization, balancing workload, balancing those multiple demands at the same time, but there's also personal relevant stress. And that's where you start hitting a nerve that's personally relevant. I don't feel respected. I don't get the praise at work. I don't feel appreciated. I'm embarrassed as well. I'm misunderstood. I was in the military, and one of the things that we got when we did a good job, I got a medal that said, hey, you kicked butt in this situation. I got a medal to show for that. At work, I might get a certificate. Hey, you got promoted. Look at this. Okay. And what we're seeing now is, and COVID really put a rubber stamp on this process, is role and rule ambiguity. We're juggling multiple demands in multiple ways, and what's happening is that those different roles that we're serving, it's more confusing, and people don't know where one ends and where another begins. Shannon talking about Zooming with people or doing virtual conferencing with individuals and passing stuff under doors. We weren't able to see our loved ones in the hospitals. We were stuck in rules that constantly change. Mask, don't mask. There's a lot of things that we're struggling with as a society. All this leads to a process called stress overload. And this is basically when the unexpected builds too high for too long and causes what we call hardships, which then causes role confusion and demands those shifts in expectations. Do I expect my partner to be there for me as a resource? Do I expect my children to comply, or are they overwhelmed? Are they coping as well? Did I give them a cell phone to cope? Okay? When we lack the resources to address the stressor and we don't see it as resolvable, it leads to what we call as a crisis. So do we have the inner strength? Do we have the wherewithal? Are we thinking clearly about what we need? And chances are we're not. We don't know well enough to say, hold on a second, I need to think about this more clearly. And this anxiety kind of builds up over time, and it's a normal reaction to stress. But anxiety becomes a problem when it interferes with daily functioning, whenever it's something that we don't see that we know how to deal with effectively. It can be beneficial in some situations, like we said, like eustress, but it can also be excessive. And this is when it's out of proportion to the situation. And it's likened to the term that I use of using 10 pounds of dynamite when only one was necessary. Okay? We throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have all these different terms that describe this process. But the bottom line is underneath all of this is the difficulty to control. And that's what we're striving to do, is figure out where we fit in this world and what do we have control of. And it negatively affects the way that we do life. So how do we survive? And you guys, you all have seen this described before, the fight or flight response. And the basic gist is that you're either eaten or you survive, okay? So we can respond to stress in two different ways. We fight out of anger. It's the anger approach, more likely to survive the threat by killing it. It's a perception that I'm going to put up my dukes, I'm going to go for it. I think I can overcome this by fighting. The other flip side is flight, and this is out of fear and avoidance. In other words, we notice the threat and we decide to escape, which is also out of survival. And the interesting thing is that fight and flight are basically the same go response. It's our innate instinct to do something, okay? It's a good thing. The interesting thing, I got to talk about this real quick, is we have the little shark analogy up here. If you're ever in an ocean and a shark is swimming towards you, what's your instinct? It's to fight, right? So you turn around and swim as fast as you can. Actually, the truth is swim towards the shark. It shortcuts their neural circuitry. They're at the top of the food chain, and if something's coming after them, it throws them off. And if you get close enough, punch it in the nose. So if that doesn't work, you can blame me later, okay? That dude at that one conference said to swim towards the shark, okay? So if you're lucky enough to be at an ocean and you're enjoying some downtime, that's the takeaway here. But we oftentimes forget about the go-to response is not fight or flight for most of us. It's actually freeze. And this is what we call the last-ditch response, where the brain registers the stressor as life-threatening, and we're telling ourselves, you're too slow to run and you're too small to fight, so I'm going to wait for assistance until the threat goes away. And we see this with rabbits, right? If you've ever been rabbit hunting, you know that rabbit will dart under a bush and stay there. It's just waiting for things to go away because nothing's going to come out and help it. This, unfortunately, is our go-to response in daily life. It's what we're all too used to getting to doing. And when we see the stress overload becoming a mental health condition, this is what people ask me all the time, is when do we see mental health issues becoming mental health issues? And everybody's like, I don't know, there's no research on that. The bottom line is when we are in a stress response cycle that doesn't end. That's what this is all about, is then what do we do with that? We got to close the stress response cycle. And a lot of us forgot how to do that. You know, I talk about going to the ocean and having fun with your family. But what happens is it entails our body and mind being immobilized from responding effectively. And I liken this to two different things. It's the PTSD response and acute stress disorder. Acute stress is baby PTSD. It's within a smaller window of time the symptoms present themselves. But you got to understand what PTSD is. Your body is stopping because it perceives a threat. The threat may not be real. I might not be overseas again, but I experienced something that reminded me of that, and my neural circuitry goes back to a primitive state, and it takes me back to that point in time. So now I do everything I can do to avoid the situation. My heart rate is elevated all the time. I'm consumed by those thoughts. I'm not sleeping well. I'm not thinking well. And I brought in another term called diffuse physiological arousal. And this is basically the process by which we are overwhelmed with physical response. And what happens is when we experience arousal, emotional flooding, if you will, we're not thinking clearly. And if I'm having a fight with my wife, chances are it's going to take my body 30 minutes to calm down so I can be effective in communicating again. Because for that 30 minutes, I'm just waiting for her to shut up so I can say my part. And that's what we're seeing. It's ineffective communication. I'm not even listening to what she's saying. I'm shutting down. All right, now what do we do? So the next poll is, what mental health issues do you most oftentimes encounter, whether they're in you or in those around you? Maybe the people that you work with. Maybe it's your family. Maybe it's your children. So what kind of things are you seeing? And by the way, I'm crazily moved by this. This is awesome. My first experience using Poll Everywhere, so I thank Dr. Ferrell for this. This is a fun process. So we'll let some additional things come in. You need more options. Well, so we did end up limiting this just a little bit. These are actually the most common. Of all the mental health disorders, I teach a psychopathology class, and there's lots. And there's a new DSM coming out in actually this month. There's lots and lots and lots of mental health issues out there. And the thing is that they run the spectrum, but these are the most common mental disorders. The only one that's actually not up here is psychotic disorders. So that entails schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder. So that's when we have hallucinations, delusions, things like that, that are also associated with sometimes other conditions. Personality disorders are actually pretty common as well, but we didn't include those. So let's move and see what happens. Can I just, hot dog. All right, so this is actually very telling, and it fits exactly with what we're seeing in the field. On campus, so we have exposure to a lot of students. We are seeing massive spikes in anxiety and depression, namely anxiety. And the thing is what is anxiety really about? It's about fear of the unknown. It's about lack of control. It's about being unsure about how to manage situations. That's what we're seeing across campus. And when you couple that with negative coping, we got a recipe for disaster. And so depression is up there as well. Our bodies and minds are reacting to stress in unique ways. Eating disorders is pretty low right now. But again, in eating disorder and alcohol abuse, those are coping mechanisms, striving for control or to numb out. And so we'll talk about that here in a little bit. All right. So what's this pathway to overload entail? Burnout. Burnout 101. And burnout is just simply emotional exhaustion from overload or caring too much for too long. Caring too much for too long. And I'm not saying to not care what other people think or what you do is like, well, darn it, I'm just going to do whatever I want. But it's a constant release of neurochemicals in the brain. We're constantly in that stress response process. It's always going on. We don't give our body time to recover. And it creates what we call homeostasis. It creates stuckness. We are simply stuck in responding due to that exposure to those situations that activate emotions. Over time, it leads to a lot of decreased satisfaction. I don't see myself as an independent thinking individual. I got to go along with emotion. I got to say yes all the time. Lower senses of accomplishment as well. I don't feel good about what I'm doing anyway. And what is the major causer of burnout? Human giver syndrome. This is a newer term that's been kind of put out in the field. Human giver syndrome. This is when we're stuck in the giving role without reciprocity for receiving. What happens is we are constantly giving and giving and giving. And I'm one of the biggest givers in the world. I love giving. I love serving other people. But if I serve at the sacrifice of my own sense of self, my own capacity to recover, I'm going to be worthless over time. And what happens is, who do I start taking that out on? My 16-year-old who should be driving right now. He's getting the brunt of Dad's wrath right now, okay? Depersonalization and going through the motions. We lose sense of our autonomy. We lose sense of who I am and what I enjoy. Oh, I enjoy working for the man, right? I enjoy working for the business. I got to take more on. And I just end up going through the motions. And who do you think the winners of the burnout contest are in society? I'd put farmers up here, number one, right? Healthcare workers, teachers, emergency responders, law enforcement. Those are the winners that we see. They are giving 100% of the time. The better takeaway from this process, though, is what's going on behind the scenes. This is the telling tale. Lack of control, unclear expectations, challenging workplace dynamics, extremes of activity, lack social support, and work-life balance. And so what happens is we take those stressors home, and our partners are getting the worst of us. Our children are getting the worst of us. We go back into that work environment. We put a smile on our face, and they get the worst of us as well. And we quit being effective at what we intended to do in the first place and serve. So why do we get stuck? There's a lot of chronic stressors going on. We already talked about the different types of stress, but we're talking about all those different balloons in the air. And if you ever do a little exercise, we did this with the Boy Scouts just a while back. We're like, hey, how long can you keep one balloon in the air? It's a fun exercise. You can do it, for quite a while. Now do 2. After 2, you're pretty much screwed. You got about 10 seconds to keep 3 balloons in the air at one time. Try it out sometime. I call it bobbing 101. And we use the analogy of how many basketballs can you keep underwater? And eventually they're going to start popping up, right? I bob. Right? I'm going underwater all the time. Okay, that's my likening of versus graceful swimming or floating. I'm bobbing constantly. And what we're doing is we're fighting for control over things that we oftentimes can't. We're flighting over daily things in our relationships, our supports. They spill over into those other areas that work stress affects our parenting. It deteriorates communication, problem solving. It's socially appropriate to be stuck in this as well. We can't run from our obligations. We can't hit our colleague in the face. It's socially inappropriate, okay? So we put a smile on our face and we bite our tongue. It's also safer to do so as well. It's protective, okay? If we ignore it out of survival, it's simply easier than dealing with it. Whenever I have to confront a difficult situation, something like asking your boss for a raise, that's anxiety provoking. And it's one of the things I get from my students all the time. They're like, how do I negotiate a salary at my job? I'm like, you gotta kind of toughen up and realize that you're worth something. But it's hard for a lot of us to speak up for ourselves, okay? And so it's easier to just ignore it. Disconnection, we don't want to bother anyone. We don't want to make it difficult for everybody else. So we're simply avoiding that anxiety. And then I told you I'd bring up trauma again. A lot of us are carrying baggage. We have different experiences growing up that we put a smile on our face. When I was 8 years old, my dad was in a pretty serious work accident. It left him in a hospital for 4 months, and we had a small farm as well. And he called me his legs until I was 18, and I finally said, I got to get off the farm. This is killing me. But he called me his legs because he couldn't walk. And so I became the helper. And I was instrumental to maintaining the farm, but an 8-year-old kid taking out hay in the dead of winter, that's tough. But I put a smile on my face, and it's just what we did because we're tough, okay? So it's the affliction of the powerless. And there's different types of traumatic experiences. Those are disasters in nature, but atrocities are those things that we experience as humans. And we're seeing a lot of that right now with Ukraine. We're seeing a lot of that right now as we recover from COVID. We're seeing a lot of that right now as we see our adolescents coping in maladaptive ways. And it simply overwhelms the ordinary systems of care that give people a sense of control, connection, and meaning. And some of those things that we should have been using the entire time, like AA, we shut down our AA meetings, but we kept the liquor stores open. That was the one thing I couldn't wrap my head around. Let's shift to virtual at the very least. So let's do another quick poll. What do you typically do to deal with stress in your life? Everybody has their go-to. What is it? Sports. This is awesome. And if there's more than one that fits, go ahead and send another text. All right, we're slowing down just a little bit, so let's go ahead and see what the poll turns up. All right. A lot of us, most of us are engaging in watching movies or television. That's one of the things that I think everybody did. I binged. I started binging on Netflix over COVID. I watched Lost. That was bad. I watched Lost every night before I went to sleep. Horrible decision. Horrible. A year. I didn't sleep for a year during COVID. Bad move. But anyway, a lot of us are getting outside. We're engaging in exercise and sports, spending time with family or friends. Some of you have positive family and friends in your life, so that's a good thing, okay? That's an indicator of that. A high percentage of us are eating and snacking, okay? We'll talk more about that here in a second. Yoga is one of those things that is still a mystery to me. Doing some of the calming activity, which is great. Sitting in a bathtub, that's fun. We'll talk more about mindfulness and meditation and things like that. Music, drinking. Some of you are lying. If you're a fisher out there, you nod your head. Any fishers? Okay. My dad taught me not to nod my head when I go to a farm sale. It's like, don't do that. Don't scratch your nose. Okay. All right. So how are we managing stress? The usual maladaptive techniques. And I call them maladaptive because a lot of these things that we even just listed aren't closing the stress response cycle. Okay. We tease ourselves and pretend that they are. So a lot of us are using those self-defeating methods like fighting and confronting. I will fight, I will challenge, it's not me, it's you. Damn it, I'm not the problem, it's you. We deflect responsibility. Some of us suppress and mask. We cover up things. We engage in maladaptive coping like movies and TV shows. Some of us drink. In April of 2020, pulled the stats. Alcohol sales were up 234% in 2020. What a business. And nearly half, this is the interesting thing that's behind it, about 50% report increased stress as the reason for increased drinking. People were directly tying it to stress. So what does drinking do? It numbs you up. It ignores the stressor and you just detach. A lot of us avoid. This is my thing. I check out or even take on more. I take on more to avoid the responsibility of dealing with the other responsibilities. And some of us ruminate. Why am I not good enough? Why did I not do more? What else can I do? All of these survival strategies simply postpone the completion of the stress cycle. And this is the takeaway. Just because you've dealt with a stressor doesn't mean that you've actually dealt with the stress itself. So you have to complete the cycle. So what are in our toolkits? And the thing is that I pick on some of these different coping mechanisms. What are you doing to deal with the stressor? Those aren't bad things, but they get the juices flowing. And we're going to talk about some of this. The bottom line is it always involves doing something. And I put up here the word new. I challenge you to do something new. Do something different. I don't care what it is. Do something different and get out of that stuckness. Get out of that homeostatic kind of state of mind. Wellness is not simply a state of being, but a state of action. A lot of this process involves introspective work as well. This is where you gotta start looking at your own stuff. Look at your own baggage. What are you carrying around? What's your typical stress response look like? And take responsibility for it versus blaming. Create a list of those triggers and what works and what doesn't work. And that also entails being proactive rather than reactive. And so it's getting ahead of it. Now, right now, you're pretty calming, we're doing okay. But think about when you're confronted with a stressor, what will you do instead? That's what you got to get ahead of. And this is where we start talking about overload, stress overload, and the acute stress process. Those switches come quickly. And in our field, we talk a lot about suicide awareness. And there's one little fine detail in it, that acute stress causes people to respond in maladaptive ways very quickly. And if we can get an individual who's dealing with suicidal ideation out of that acute stress response process, we can save lives. That's what this is all about. And so what we've got to do, we got to organize. We got to organize our needs, those tasks, delegation of responsibilities. These things can help. I'm a Post-it note kind of person, and so I just got to get organized so that I can plan. So a lot of folks ask me, they said, what should I be doing instead? What's the best thing to tell people to do? And these aren't things that you haven't already thought of, but I'm going to give you some theory and research behind it. First and foremost, get moving. We all know that being outside, getting that vitamin D is absolutely crucial. It causes your brain to release chemicals that are fantastic. It tells your brain that you've successfully survived a threat and your body is a safe place to live. What we see in stored memories is kind of an interesting process. If I'm exposed to a traumatic event, that memory gets stored in a maladaptive way. And that's what we see a lot with PTSD responses. I got trained in this thing called eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It's wackadoodle stuff, but it works. And we use it a lot with veterans. We use it a lot with sexual trauma survivors. What we're trying to do is get the brain to open up so that information can flow and we can make sense of it. Eye movement, rapid eye movement. When do we see rapid eye movement? When we sleep, when we dream. And what happens? Whenever I mow the yard, when I push mow the yard, my brain starts doing some crazy stuff. It's called bilateral stimulation. We're exercising both parts of both sides of our brain by just moving. Bicycle riding, mowing, walking, doing anything like that starts to create the flow of the juices in the brain and allows the brain to heal. Mindfulness techniques. I'm not a mindfulness person at all. I think yoga is still this mystery. I don't know what it does or what it's all about. But it's slowing our body down. It's the ability to be aware of your inner experiences, your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, without being overwhelmed by and controlled by them. It's being grounded and aware of yourself so that those thoughts and feelings don't overwhelm and control your actions. We've got a lot of different things that we teach individuals to do. The Navy SEALs get the kudos for what we call box breathing. And that's where you breathe in 4 seconds, you hold it 4 seconds, you blow it out for 4 seconds, you hold 4 seconds, you start again. Breathe in 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, that's box breathing. What it does is it saturates the brain with oxygen. We teach children to do this. Whenever they come in from stress, and they're dealing with mental health issues, we say, imagine blowing a bubble. So we give them little soap bubbles and blow as long as you can. Take a deep breath and then blow as slow as you can. You're saturating the brain with oxygen so that the brain can think more clearly. Progressive muscle relaxation, we teach individuals to slowly, tense their entire body and slowly release, one part of their body at a time. We're teaching you to be in control of your body, not the other way around. Not your body being in control of you. And the same thing with visualization. We use this a lot with trauma as well, where you imagine, where's the stressor, what color is it, where does it sit in your body, and a lot of people say, it's right here in my chest, what shape is it, it's a square, what color is it, it's red hot, it's red, and, so imagine that thing, rising through your head, where is it now, it's up in my neck, and it's up in my head, now it's above my head, how do you feel? And people are like, really, actually pretty good. And I use this clinically, and I still am amazed at how powerful of a process it is. Yes, sir.
Take them through a box breathing in 4 seconds.
Let's do it. All right, everybody. Get into your Zen moment. Okay. What I want you to do is breathe in slowly through your nose, filling your diaphragm for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Do that 3 seconds, or 3 seconds. Do that 3 times in a row. And you'll find how beneficial it can be to slow your system down to where your diffuse physiological arousal isn't taking over, is what we're trying to aim for. Get in touch with the emotions. I can't say this enough. Include a feelings chart. I have a feelings chart. I actually have 2 or 3 or 4 of them all around my house. One on the garage door. That's mine. I've got them for the children. They every day they go and put their, mine's around overwhelmed constantly and enraged, okay? But the thing is get in touch with emotions. A lot of us, I didn't grow up with parents who taught me how to understand emotions, which is why I'm a therapist, okay? Can't say that enough. So we've got to start becoming more aware of emotions. We also say that understanding emotions is cathartic on different levels. Labeling an emotion is cathartic all by itself. I'm depressed, that explains everything. I'm enraged, that explains everything. But also experiencing them, letting it out, expressing it is cathartic. Having somebody else validate it is cathartic, which is why we have therapy, right? And then we normalize emotions. Of course, you're feeling overwhelmed. You're not alone. A lot of people in your same experience the same thing. Letting it out, crying, we say it relieves that pressure buildup. We say go ahead and let it out. Practice feelings that you felt in the past, even painful emotions. And what this is in a clinical term is called systematic desensitization. You're practicing in a safe environment, experiencing those emotions that were difficult from the past. It reminds you that you overcame and that you're not in a dangerous situation any longer. We oftentimes emphasize, I'm going to hit the gas pedal here, emphasize creative expression like art and sports. Create the context that tolerates and encourages big emotions. And this is oftentimes the loophole to being nice. I can scream at whoever, right? The Chiefs. I'm a Chiefs fan. And when they threw that last game away, I was really disappointed. Okay? I'm allowed to scream at the TV whenever the pokes do something stupid as well. Okay. But the bottom line is it also leads to energy and excitement and enthusiasm for tomorrow. I can't wait to see my kid's soccer game on Thursday. I can't wait to get together with the guys and go whatever, okay? Use positive social interaction as well, and that's to reassure the mind that the world is sane and safe and that not all people suck. Just these ones over here. But the rest of them are pretty cool. They understand me and they love me, okay? Lifespan and culture constraints the choices that we have for this connection as well. As a clinician, one of the most difficult things that I see is whenever individuals come to me, they come in a session and they're like, we are new to Stillwater and we got no one. I'm like, who are you connecting with at all? Do you got any social connections? No. Do you have a belief system? Are you plugged into church? No. They really are isolated, and that's a tough situation to get people plugged in. United Kingdom framed loneliness as a public health crisis in 2018. This was pre-pandemic, and that's why we're seeing some major concerns right now. The best toolkits also include tips on affection, and what we're aiming for is helping the body feel like it's escaped the threat. In my field, we have some research on what we call the 20-second hug. And we encourage partners to hold on to one another until relaxed. Hold on to one another. Embrace for 20 seconds. It's awkward, okay? Especially if you don't like your partner. Or engage in a 6-second kiss. I'm sorry. It's the same process. We don't kiss and hug people we don't like, okay? Both increase social bonding and the release of hormones called oxytocin. This is the bonding hormone. This is what the chemical that tells us we're safe, okay, and we're loved. Now, power of connection with animals is important too. That's why we see a lot of power with pet therapy, petting, walking, equine assisted types of therapy. Hug your cow. The aim is to be reminded that you're loved. I'm tying this back in with what I said earlier. Be better at listening. In my world, we're fixers, okay? And I'm a dude, and guys get really bad at fixing. We quit listening. We just want to fix. We don't want to be in the spotlight, so we do everything to fix, and we quit listening. So this increases others' capacity to close the stress cycle and build personal resilience. And the thing is there's two different ways of listening. One is to support and show understanding, empathy, and attend to somebody else's experiences. The other one is problem-focused support. And if I'm the fixer, I'm trying to fix for them. But if I'm trying to help them fix them, then I'm listening differently. I'm like, what did you do to fix this in the past? Did that work for you? What is it that we haven't tried before? And that likens, I'm a therapist. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and there's counseling. That's, to me, the difference between counseling and therapy, is I actually listen to help people help them resolve their own issues, okay? So I tied in earlier about sleep. Just out of curiosity, on average, how much sleep do you get per night? Is there a G? None of the above? Less than 6 hours per night is F.
If you've been in a coma for a while, that's 10 bucks.
This isn't in our slide deck, but there is a difference between men and women's need for sleep. There's a difference in adolescents and children's needs for sleep as well. And what we're seeing is some major trends with screen time that's significantly affecting our adolescent population's sleep cycles. And so it's really messing with the world. So let's flip over. We got 60 responses. 6 to 7 hours a night, 18% less than 6. So we got about a quarter of y'all looking at 7 to 8 hours per night. And I would argue that's kind of where we should be, is 7 to 8 hours a night, which is good. I think women need actually around 8 to 10 hours. It varies just a little bit. Bottom line is women, you're not getting that much sleep. Stuck in constant human giver syndrome. You're doing everything for everyone. My wife says the same thing. She's like, well, I put the youngest one to bed, and now I got to do the dishes. Yeah, I understand. So we got to start dividing up those responsibilities more effectively, communicating about that more effectively. The vast majority of you are getting 6 to 7 hours. That's not enough. I'll just tell you right now, that's not enough. So I have a slide on sleep hygiene. The aim is to get more sleep. As we age, unfortunately, we experience a shift on our sleep architecture. Our brain it functions a little differently. Our brain is set up to where we don't sleep as well. So we need more naps during the day. It makes it challenging to fully rest and allow the brain to heal, though. That's the problem. Is if we're not getting into REM sleep, our brain isn't healing. So under chronic stress, our mind races with ideas and trying to gain control in life. And what happens is we start to exhibit symptoms like anxiety and depression. And when I go to sleep, my mind races. Okay? And it just thinks of all the things I didn't do, all the things I should have done. It makes up some wackadoodle stuff as well that I just can't make sense of. And depression is actually an indicator. It's a red flag. And our newest research is now coming out and finally saying something like, could it be that many of the mental health conditions that we're seeing are actually responses to stress and trauma? How about that? Okay. And if you think about depression, one of the major symptoms of depression are disruptions in the sleep cycle. A lot of us have a difficulty getting out of bed. A lot of us have difficulty getting to sleep with depression. So we see, the spectrum. It's an alarm system, though. It's a red flag. It's telling our body that we need something, okay? We need a supportive environment to process through what we're missing. And the key to staving off mental health issues is to allow the brain to rest. I can't say this enough. I worked with a physician on campus, and I asked him, I said, why are we seeing a spike? This is pre-COVID. Why are we seeing a spike in anxiety and depression? He said, the brains are not resting. He said, we've got video gaming, which is keeping our adolescents up all night. The cell phones, they're on their phones nonstop. I get the biggest kick out of watching people at restaurants. Everybody's looking down like this. And I'm like, what did we do before we had cell phones? We used to talk to one another, right? Adolescent brains, they're overstressed. They're high performers, which is why they're asking, just teach me the answers, teach me the tests so I can perform. Okay, and they're coming from difficult backgrounds, so they don't have the capacity to resolve those issues. I'm going to punt right back to Shannon.
Okay. I want to loop back to something that Dr. Brosi said about that 20-second hug. How many of you guys have ever read the book, The 5 Love Languages? You know what my wife and my child and my dog's #1 love language is? Physical touch. When I took the assessment, do you know what my score on physical touch was? 0. I'll tell you one thing I liked about the pandemic, and that was 6 feet. Back up, right? So my wife gets really annoyed when I go 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. She's like, just do it silently. And the 6-second rule, I'm into that now, right? Matt gave you guys a ton of fantastic information. I know we're kind of winding things down here, but I want to get back to what the title of this presentation was, this concept called toxic grit. And I love farmers and ranchers. I was a farmer and rancher. I have tremendous respect for them. I also recognize in some ways the things that make us tough are the things that make us not resilient. Like we said, if something's too tough, it doesn't bend, it snaps. So what does that mean for us in agriculture, right? First off, fierce independence, self-reliance. That's huge for us. It's how we get through those tough times. But it's isolating, okay? Like we said, farmers and ranchers don't talk about their feelings. Bill, I sure felt vulnerable when the combine caught on fire, right? But it takes me back to an episode of Cheers, which for you new kids, that was a sitcom in the 80s, okay? But do you even remember the character Woody from Cheers, the super cheerful guy from Indiana? And one of the customers asked Woody, Woody, why are you so cheerful all the time? Like, anytime something's bothering me or it's stressful, I just pretend that I have a bottle right here, and I just cram it down into that bottle. And if more stuff comes along, I just cram it down into that bottle. And if that gets filled up, I just cram it down some more. And the other guy's psycho, right, and just kind of walks away. Like, if we keep internalizing that stuff and keep isolating ourselves, we lose the ability to connect to those support systems that Matt was telling us about. We can talk about being tough as nails, right? Man, Ferrell withstood the fire on his farm, and then the drought, and then the lousy commodity prices, and then his wife ran off with the dog, and da-da-da-da-da-da, right? Human beings do not have an unlimited capacity to assimilate stress. You've got to connect with some support at some point or another, right? Suck it up, buttercup. Anybody ever hear that on their farms? Uh-huh. By the way, I always tell my students, if you start dating somebody in college, let me help you out and figure out if this is going to work real fast. Number 1, credit report. Number 2, criminal background check. Number 3, long road trip. Number 4, build fence. Number 5, work cattle with that person. If you still like them after that, you got a shot, right? Have you ever talked to another human being the way that you talk to your family? I was in a family transition meeting yesterday, and he said, like, my brothers have called me liars and cheats and swindlers because this person was managing the family ranch on behalf of the trust. He's like, you would never say that to a random stranger you just met on the street. You might do it on Twitter, but not a person face to face, right? And yet, how often do we tell the people around us in the farm or ranch that we love them, that we appreciate what they do? Not in my family, okay? And my family loved me, I can tell, but here's the deal. I'm a lawyer, okay? I can convict you on circumstantial evidence, right? Well, that person loved their family because look at all the sacrifices they made. Clearly, that was a person that loved their family. No. I want confessions. Yes, I know that person loved them because they wouldn't shut up about it. They told them every day that they loved them. It's in written form. It's in text messages, voicemails, Post-it notes on their car. Clearly, this person was in love with that other person. See a lot of that in agriculture? Nope. Should we? Yep. So, suck it up, buttercup. Tell the people that you love them. Show some courage that way, right? And then we face all of this generational sandwiching, and I don't have enough time to go into all that. But like Matt said, we've talked about role and rule ambiguity. And one time that we see that writ large is where you have to take care of your parents when they were supposed to be your caregivers, right? And you're doing that at the same time that you're trying to take care of your kids, you're also trying to take care of your parents. And that's something a lot of us just weren't prepared for, right? And as our rural communities continue to age, we're going to see more and more and more of that. So I want these to be strengths and assets for you, and they can be if you look at them in the right perspective and look for connectedness rather than isolation. So, all right, Ferrell, you and Brosi rambled for an hour. What do you want us to do about it? Something. We want you to do something. And if you take, like I said, nothing else away, we want you to recognize when you or the people around you are starting to trend from that spot of being well and resilient and capable of bouncing back to getting unwell, overloaded, losing that ability to get back to functionality, and especially before they get to the point where they really can't function. They've completely turned inside. They're not able to engage in good interactions with their family, with their customers, whatever the case might be, and spot that and do something about it. So that requires some awareness. It requires a little bit of training. And I live in a rural community, okay? And we have a fantastic volunteer fire department. We have a fantastic volunteer EMS. I love those folks. They drop whatever they're doing, and they drive to our emergency center, get the equipment, and get out there as fast as they can when there's a fire or when there's a medical emergency. But you know what? It takes time. It takes precious minutes for them to do that. And that's why I tell everybody I have contact with, as somebody who lost their brother in a farm accident, you better train yourself. You better pick up that first aid manual, you better pick up that paramedics training set, and find out how to help people until help arrives. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to be prepared to help yourself and to help others until professional help can get there and help you. So, could you do it? If you were in contact with somebody in so severe a situation that they were talking about self-harm. They were talking about suicide. When Matt says suicidal ideation, means they're talking about, hey, maybe I should do that. Hey, how could I do that? And by the way, the attempt rate for women is way higher than for guys. But guess who has the better success rate? Guys. Because we have access to more lethal means. We've got guns. We've got fast equipment, right? When someone's talking to you about that, could you do something about it? See how we're coming in here. The answers are trickling in a little slower on this one, huh? It's tough, folks. But while the answers are coming in, let me tell you something else that Matt and I have found. Lots of people think that if I mention, hey, are you thinking about suicide to someone who's in a point of distress, we think that's going to tip them over and be like, oh yeah, I should do it. I mean, I'm showing the signs. You know what? 180 degrees off. The scientific research shows that if someone asks, hey, are you thinking about suicide or self-harm? What happens most of the time is that snaps that person out of that cycle. Wow, somebody actually noticed that I was hurting, and they cared enough about me to ask about it. Okay, and that kind of literally and figuratively pulls them back from the ledge. So if you notice someone that you feel is getting close to that, you talk to them and say, hey, I care about you, I love you. Let's talk about this, okay? And you stay with that person until they're out of danger, okay? We've got 60, Matt. We think we're good? Let's see how it went. Oh, okay. And that's okay. If you answer, I'm not sure, that's okay. Let's get you sure. Let's figure out a way to get you over here into the A spot. You want to do something? Here you go. Mental health first aid is an 8-hour training, and now you can do it online or you can do it live. Just go to mentalhealthfirstaid.org to find out how to register for that. Or you can go to the QPRinstitute.com. QPR is a 3-hour? I believe it's a 3-hour training on suicide intervention. Question, persuade, refer. You can do it. At most, it takes a day of your time. I've gone through mental health first aid, loved it. Want to do it again because I want to keep training that stuff in me so that when I need it, it's there. But I loved mental health first aid. It's one of the most valuable 8 hours I've spent in my life. So again, mentalhealthfirstaid.org, qprinstitute.com. You can go there and learn more about that, learn how to sign up for a training. Hugely, hugely valuable. And if you want a little bit more of a primer, you can go to extension.okstate.edu/farmstress. Matt and his team put together a phenomenal series of 6 videos, the longest one's an hour. Most of them are shorter than that, which you can learn kind of the basic vocabulary of mental health issues. You can learn how to deal with stress. You learn about wellness and mindfulness, box breathing, meditation, how to handle catastrophic stress when there's been a disaster for your neighbor or for yourself. All sorts of tools that are available there. You can go to it at your leisure. Accompanying materials, references are there as well. But having said all that stuff, we want this presentation to be a start of a conversation, and Matt and I are constantly looking for ways that we can better reach our rural communities. Like I said, you folks sit at the nexus point of your communities just by virtue of what you do for a living. So tell us how we can help you. One of the things that we're constantly trying to do, and we've talked to Mary Ruth about this, is we want to put together a program where we can train you to be a first responder. We want you to be equipped to help somebody and then get them to a professional to get them the help that they need. But right now, the floor is yours. We've got a little bit of time before the next session start, and we know you've got some time to interact with your vendors. If you've got questions, throw them up here. And if you don't want to do that right now, that's okay. Throw them out there anyway. And we'll address it. Oh, we've got one. Do you ever come to churches to do this? Ordained Baptist minister. If you didn't get it from the way that I talk, by the way. Baptist minister, lawyer, auctioneer. So that's why I kind of talk the way that I do. But absolutely yes. And here's why. Confession time, folks. When I was a teenager, I had a mental health episode that got to the point where I was at suicide ideation. I was like, I need to do this. What are the means that are available to me? What will hurt the least and be the fastest? And you know, the mental health professional I had in the community of Leedy, Oklahoma? Nobody. But I did have my local pastor, who was the only counselor around, right? So absolutely, Matt and I would love to reach out to churches to talk about this, because lots of times our local clergy is de facto the only counselor that we've got in our rural communities, and we would love to equip them with this kind of information. So I mean, there are the local pastors. We want to talk to lenders, attorneys, whoever is in the ag circle so we can help them for that. Tell you what, I'll leave my agent's card on the table, so if you want to sign me and or Matt up, we will totally do that for you guys. See, we talk elements. But yes, we are happy to come and talk to you and help you be equipped to reach out to whoever you need to reach out to. Because like we said, you guys are at the point, you're at the crossroads where you can see the people around you and who needs help. And we really hope that today, not only that this helped you, we sincerely hope that it helped you, but when you're interacting with the people around you that you can kind of keep an eye out and very honestly ask the question, how are you doing? I know that's how we greet everybody in Oklahoma, and I want you to grab your friend by the shoulders, gently, not violently, that'll freak him out. Just like, no, really. How are you doing? 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. But talk, yes ma'am.
I'd just like to advocate for everybody here to speak with the legislators to stop cutting mental health funds in this state. Losing money, and you think you've got a mental health desert, it's everywhere. Waiting lists are too long. I used to work in emergency mental health, and I would sometimes spend 2 days with a patient, a suicidal patient, in the emergency room waiting on a mental health bed.
And
We can't keep cutting our resources.
And I'll tell you, after all this happened to me, I'm like, all right, Farrell, you need to talk to somebody. So I found out the best counselor referral I could get and tried to schedule an appointment, and it's a waiting list of a few weeks. And that's in Stillwater, which is a pretty big town, right? So that's tough. 9 months. At OSU, our counseling center has, I believe, a 6-week, not Matt's doing fine, but our campus student counseling center is about a 6-week wait. It's tough.
If you're in the Grand Lake area, walk in. They see you right there.
Ooh, fantastic at Grand Lake. Matt, sorry, I'm not looking backwards. Other questions we got? Oh, well, Matt, if you see something and say something, but they refuse, what should you do? Here, you can have your microphone back. I'm going to turn that one actually over to the professional.
That's actually a tricky one. So you always run up against, at what point do you call 911 and get somebody to a hospital? That's kind of what it's all about. I would argue that a lot of times just sitting with them is enough, so that they know they're not alone. But in our field, there's only so much that you can do. I call it spreading the liability. So in other words, call a physician, get them to a physician, call a loved one that they do trust. One of the most heartwarming situations I ever saw was where we had a gentleman in our clinic who was, his wife had just dropped him off for therapy. Literally said, we're here for couples therapy. Nope, surprise, I'm divorcing you. And she literally got up and walked out. And we get that a lot, by the way. And so this guy was in horrible shape. And we said, who in your life do you have that you trust? No one. And we sat with him for about 15, 20 minutes, and he finally said, my wrestling coach back in high school was really cool. And he said, would you let us call him? He's like, okay. So we literally put the guy on the phone, and I've never seen an angel get his wings on at that kind of moment, but it was amazing. So the wrestling coach had the guy come to his house, and he stayed there for 2 or 3 days, got his feet stabilized. But it's a really tricky position because we do care, and we want people to get the help that they need. But getting them primed to be able to talk about some of those things that they're struggling with is tough. So,
the question there kind of about land impacts, right? Whether it's condemnation for any kind of project, right? All the tools that we've talked about really apply there. Do we have something specific in line with that? We don't, but again, all the tools that we've talked about really come into play there, and that's why we want farmers, whether it's drought, wildfire, tornado. I mean, Oklahoma's atmosphere is constantly trying to kill us. Right, in so many creative ways. Last week we had a flash flood, tornado, ice storm, like Oklahoma, right? So all those tools really apply to that. So really excited about the new National Suicide Hotline and that nice, easy to remember number. Until then, I don't have it memorized because I've got it at my phone, but I want you to find the National Suicide Helpline. It's 1-888. Oh, I don't have my phone because my phone's the timer here. Use the Google machine. Find that number and put it in your contacts so that if you find yourself in need of that, boop, there you go. You got it. Support groups for farmers, ranchers, or ag-related groups. Like I said, Matt and I and I've lost track of how many grant applications we've filled out. It's a lot. to try to put together a curriculum where we can train peer counselors, because that's huge. Nobody can help you like someone who's been in your shoes. So we really want to get some support for that. And until we get that, and when we get that, we will not shut up about it. We'll be recruiting all y'all to be part of that. But in the meantime, peer groups are a hugely effective tool, and it may be something as simple as your coffee shop group. As long as your coffee shop group isn't just polite, right? How you doing, Bill? Great. How you doing, Ted? Great. Good. Silently drinks coffee for the next hour and a half, right? No. Find a group and all come up with a pact that confidentially we're going to talk to each other and we're going to tell each other how we really feel. And that's huge to us. Echo, right? Which they've been putting out virtual meetings every week, and that's been hugely successful. We appreciated that. And I'm apologizing, some of my responses are dropping off. Matt, can you get on the iPad there? I think you should be able to scroll back up there, because I want to, while we're talking, and by the way, if you guys need to spend time visiting with the vendors, feel free to do that. I teach, hold on. Mary Ruth said, no, don't tell them that. I teach undergrads. I'm used to people getting up and walking out on me all the time, but I know we're running past our time. So, Mary Ruth, before we tell them to do that, and we're happy to keep the conversation going until Mary Ruth kicks us out the door, but Mary Ruth does have some announcements for you before we start our next round of sessions. So, Mary Ruth, come on up.
That felt like a very abrupt ending to that session. Thank you so much, Dr. Ferrell and Dr. Brosi. A couple of months ago, when we were talking about a keynote speaker, I emailed both of these guys in a group email, and I said, so I have this idea, and we need to talk. And this is what happened, and I could not think of a better reason to give a 20-second hug, and I'm not a hugger. So thank you, gentlemen. One more round of applause for these guys.